was really nice, Erica. Thank you very much. And you know, it's really an honor to be here, and it's incredible that there are so many people in this room that are just charged up about old canoes. That's really making my day, because usually it's like, you know, us over in Kasan just talking about canoes over coffee by ourselves, but this is pretty nice. So, you know, that's really important, because, you know, it does no good if just one person has an interest, essentially. I mean, you float around your own little world and you're kind of the crazy person off in the distance, but, you know, this way we can all be crazy together. Anyway, you know, like Erica said, in this case, we're representing this little nonprofit, Haida Canoe Revitalization Group, and we're kind of a grassroots operation here. You know, there's a number of us involved, and a bunch of them are back in Kasan, and you know, you guys are a part of it now. But my wife Bonnie she can fix anything. You know, she's kind of hanging out back here behind the screen, working electronics, but she's really a driving force in making sure that any problems we have can get solved. And Stephanie should go on a little bit about herself. She's kind of an amazing person. I should mention, you know, like we are Haida from Kasan, and you know, do appreciate being here in your territory in a friendly way. I think I've been watching for tomatoes, things like that. I haven't seen any yet. I see you over there, Ginger. Willard said it was okay already. So. But you know, my interest is kind of all things Haida canoes. Stephanie, you want to talk a little bit about your part in this?
Yeah, I just end up volunteering for a lot of unpaid work for my family, and that's why I'm here.
Stephanie's pretty great, yeah.
So my dad is the canoe geek, and I'm like a support person, and I like to do that because I never know what I'm up to. I have a 5-year-old fantastic creature here that I mostly am interested in. But for this project, I got to kind of geek out about photography, and it has been super fun, and I hope that I get to do that a bunch more times. Yeah.
Okay, that was pretty simple. So Stephanie, you know, she has good to see you back there, Fred. She has you know, a little history with photography. She had a small photography business quite a number of years ago, and still has the camera. And in some of our documentation work, we've been starting to use photogrammetry, which, like, totally new term for me. I had no idea what it was. We'll see a little bit of it here in this presentation, but Stephanie has taken a couple of classes. Like, I think each class was like a week long. She flew up to Anchorage for this. It's kind of high-tech stuff and beyond my comprehension, with cameras and lights and a lot of computer stuff. But anyway, Stephanie's really into that, and we have another partner who's really into it as well. Anyway, maybe we can just move forward a little bit here with unlocking the wisdom. Sorry, Nan, I was just talking to myself, really. You know, unlocking the wisdom of an ancient canoe. This project is in a large part funded through a matching grant that, okay, Dale, I see your time there. What's going on? Anyway, we got a matching grant from the state, but it's the funding comes from the National Park Service, and it's really instrumental in kind of helping us afford to be able to do this work that we've been kind of talking about for a long time. All right, Nan, you can move forward a little bit. Thank you. So this is an old picture. You know, it's a sketch from, it says 1793 here, so it's a while back. This is down in Haida country, some folks in a canoe. Canoes, for most, if not all culture, I don't want to really speak for everybody, but you know, the folks all along the coastline, along the northwest coast, they're very foundations of the cultures are kind of centered around canoes. And you know, all of you know this is important, right? Because a lot of the traveling you do is going to be by boat if you get off this island. In modern times, we've got the ones that fly. You know, that's nice too, but it wasn't that long ago, and you know, all the travel was on the water, and you get stuck on one rock for too long. It's nice to get to another one and see what's going on over there, you know. Find a friend, or you know, something different to eat, or do some trading, or whatever it is. I think this is just a real nice illustration that shows kind of what people were up to in 1793. You know, that was before we had cell phones and, you know, information sharing across super long distances very often. You know, people did travel long distances in the canoes for many reasons, but everybody wasn't doing it all the time. But there were a lot of people doing it. I think there was one account that I read from an old ship's log, and it was in the I think it was 1700s. I don't store numbers in my brain all that well, but I think that's what it was. And they described something like 600 canoes gathering around a trading ship on the north end of Haida Canoe. You know, 600. And you see pictures, there aren't a lot of them, you know, because photography didn't come in until pretty close to 1900 in this area. But, you know, you do see some pictures where there might be 50 or 60 canoes on the beach in front of some place. So it's easy enough for me to believe that if you went back further, there would be a large number of canoes like that. Okay, Bonnie, next slide. This is another one. This is just a nice sketch. I don't know the date on this one. I think this was kind of the mid to later 1800s, but a nice sketch, you know, showing a canoe sailing over in the neighborhood of Wrangell. It says here, Alaska coast near mouth of Stickeen River, Haida Indians and canoe. Next slide, please. Just going to run through a few of these older photographs to kind of, you know, give you some idea of what we're always looking for, you know, in our quest essentially to rediscover what people were doing a long time ago and how they got so darn good at it, you know, because when you start thinking about these canoes and the fact that they're dugout canoes, and, you know, most people have seen pictures of dugouts from around the world, and a lot of them are essentially a log that's a little bit pointed on the ends from where it's been cut off, and it's hollowed out, and it still looks quite recognizable as a log. Whereas when you look at these, they really don't look like a log. A lot of things have happened. There's a lot of really interesting technology and skill involved in building these. And there are a few people that have been attracted to, you know, the rediscovery in modern times, essentially, but there's still a lot of rediscovery to do. You know, we don't have tens of thousands of years of cumulative knowledge and skill to assist us, because in the later part of the 1800s, especially, there was a lot of changes. You know, I mean, most folks know about so many of them. There were economic changes, there were lifestyle changes, you know, a lot of folks died from incoming disease. There was just a lot of change, and with that change came some new technologies and new materials, or more abundance of some materials. And so when that happened and sawmills were set up and they started producing cut lumber, it was natural enough for people to stop making canoes out of an entire log. And in this fashion, some still persisted, but a lot of the canoe makers just transitioned into building plank boats. To me, it seems like a very natural transition, but when you imagine, next slide please, just so we don't get too bored looking at that one. But, you know, when you imagine that there were so many canoes, and I'm just guessing there was probably something like a canoe per person. Like, there were a lot of canoes, and some of those would have been old and worn out, you know, kind of like old car in my driveway right now. And the others would have been a little nicer, like my wife's car. But, you know, there would have been a lot, and you know how it is when you have something around all the time and you don't need to think about it, right? It's just everywhere. I don't need to think about these pants or whatever. Everybody's got pants, but imagine what it'd be like if like all the pants makers just kind of quietly disappeared. It'd be a different world, and that's kind of what I think happened with canoes. You know, it was such a common item that people weren't paying a lot of attention to it, and as the builders moved into different building processes, it just kind of quietly disappeared. And so when you're doing the research, and if anybody knows something that they think I need to know, I'd love to hear from you about it, because there's so much information you can find in books and stuff, and so much that I'm personally skeptical about. I'm like, I'm not sure if I believe that, because in the world that I've lived in, it doesn't really work that way when you do that thing. So at some point, you just get into trial and error and using what you know to try and develop a canoe like this. You know, I don't know the length of this particular one, but you know, the average length of the average canoe that people were using, you know, all through Southeast Alaska and British Columbia in the 1800s was like 30 to 40 feet. Those were kind of average size canoes. There were much larger ones and much smaller ones. Next slide, please. This is Haida territory on southern Prince of Wales. It's over on the west coast. It just shows you a few canoes. There's, I think, 3 houses visible there, and looks like half a dozen canoes or so. Next slide. This appears to be over around Sitka. You know, this picture courtesy of Sitka National Historic Park. I'm not going to count those, but you can see a lot of nice canoes there, and a few different types. The ones that I'm most interested in are the ones that are most prevalent in this picture, the most common canoes. And you'll notice on the bow end, the front end, they have this little vertical piece. Some people refer to it as a cutwater, or I usually call it a wedge. But anyway, it's just this wedge-like part on the lower front end of the canoe. It's pretty distinct. You can see some other types of canoes, at least this one here, that is more of just a double ender. Both ends look more similar to each other. And that essentially in the old days, near as I can tell from looking at zillions of old photographs, it seems like once you get about to the north end of Prince of Wales Island, kind of that line, that as you go north, you'll start to find more of this double ender type and smaller. But you know, nonetheless, a lot of these, because they were traded up there. These are almost exclusively made out of red cedar, and you know, there's lots of reasons for that. It's nice and light, easy to work with. One of the, what I would consider more important aspects is that red cedar lasts much longer than something like hemlock or spruce. So, you know, your canoe, you might, depending on how well you take care of it, you know, you might get a lifetime out of one of these canoes. So, whereas if you make it out of spruce or some other wood, hemlock would be very heavy and hard to work. So, but if you did, those would only last a few years and they would have rotted away. Okay, next slide, please. And this is just another nice shot of some folks in a canoe. The canoes were used, you know, in the smaller waterways. They were used on the rivers, like in this picture. They were used on the ocean. All kinds of things. It was real, you know, off of, oh, I shouldn't say this secret spot, but you know, off Prince of Wales Island, there's a place, and it's 20 miles offshore, where people get seagull eggs, you know, a little rock out there. And you know, in the old days, this is how they were getting there in a canoe. So people were used to that type of thing. This is during the gold rush times, you know, up near Skagway. When people were going up the Pyare River there near Dyea, a lot of the folks came from down here with dugout canoes, and they went up and made money packing and hauling stuff up the rivers as far as they could, and then they'd pack up, you know, over the trail and things like that for So those crazy miners can, oh, sorry if there's any miners in here, but those folks could go into the interior and try and get rich. Next slide, please. Yeah, there was, you know, it was common for these canoes to sail in, you see some pictures show up there right around the late 1800s or early 1900s where there's kind of this, what I would call an aftermarket rudder that people were putting on. So just fun to show that because sailing is cool. Otherwise, you know, they could be like in the other picture, if in the rivers people were using poles and ropes to propel the canoes. Of course, everyone knows that canoes were paddled as well. And I have seen photographs of, old photographs of canoes that had oars, oar locks, and paddles visible, as well as, you know, a mast for a sail. So just depending on your conditions, I suppose. Okay, next slide. This is a nice shot of one of Chief Shake's canoes over in Wrangell. I don't know where that canoe was made, but it's just a beauty. Big canoe. Lots of people in it for this photograph. This is what I would call a fancy canoe. You know, the ones that I'm talking about are a little bit smaller generally than this one, and just a little different, and usually don't have some fancy paint. You know, this type, Chief Shake's course, would have a big canoe like that. He probably had the other types too, but you need a big showy canoe if you're in that position, you know. Okay, next slide, please. This is on the beach in Newcastle. So, you know, there was a point, or, well, Fred, what year did people move from Old Kasan? Somewhere around 1900 to the Newcastle?
Yes,
yeah. So over in Newcastle, you know, people moved over to that site and set up a new community there. And this is a photograph of a canoe in the final stages of being carved there on the beach. You can, and I say in the final stages just because of the way I'm looking at this curve, I would say that the canoe has not been steamed open yet. And we'll talk about that a little bit too here in a minute. Next slide. So this is an old sketch. I don't know that there's a year on there, and again, I've forgotten the number. I think this is late 1800s that this sketch was made, and it's just illustrating a little bit about the change that occurs during a steaming process. So, you know, thinking about canoes or dugout canoes in other places that are, you know, more log-like, these ones being something different. About halfway through the building process, once you get the canoe all carved out and you kind of have the canoe blank, it's not yet at its final shape, the entire thing is heated up, and it's heated up by supporting it under the ends, putting a little bit of water in the bottom, and, you know, kind of just the right amount of water, not too much, not too little. Heating up stones in a fire until they're just hot as you can get them, you know, glowing hot preferably, putting them down into the canoe, and the water will start to boil. Keep, you know, as they cool off, take them out, put some fresh hot ones in there. Meanwhile, keeping the whole thing covered up to contain the heat and make sure that the heat is transferred all around in here so that it's not only inside, but the steam comes around, gets everything heated up. So once the wood becomes hot enough, you know, heated thoroughly all the way through the thickness of the wood, when it reaches a certain temperature, then it becomes soft enough that you can manipulate it and change its shape somewhat. And you can see in this canoe blank here on the bottom, you know, it's got this kind of hump here on the top. If you were looking at it from the end, it's going to look a little bit more like this. And then as everything heats up and the wood becomes softer and starts to, you know, basically if it's been carved right, just from the gravity pulling down on everything, it'll cause the ends to kind of come up a little bit, and it'll cause the sides to come out. And so, you know, it spreads out into this more continual curve that we're seeing here on the top in this sketch. You know, you can see that we've got some bracing in there that can be used as seats, as well as you know, thwarts to support a mast. Pretty basic sketch, but that gives you a good illustration. These old timers here, they were in this particular example, the opening at the top of the canoe here, 2 foot 8 inches. By the time they finished steaming it, 4 foot 9 inches. So they had really opened it up a lot. I haven't achieved that great a width in my steaming exercises, but you know, we've got a ways to go, and that's why we're doing all this. Essentially, it's part of why we're doing it. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so it's been a while, a little over a decade ago, there was an old canoe found out in the forest, and hey, I just noticed you back there. Yeah, like yours. So, you know, there was on Sealaska land, they were getting ready to do some helicopter logging, and a fellow that worked there, great guy, Dennis Pollock, he's since retired, but he has a strong interest in, you know, cultural things. And as he's out in the woods, you know, making sure this line is right between Sealaska land and Forest Service land, he came across some old stumps. They were just real obvious to him. He had a long history in the woods, and he was like, oh boy, there's some old stumps. This is interesting, and it's way far away from the water. And so he started looking around, and he discovered this old canoe. And you know, he had studied this kind of thing and read about it enough. He knew exactly what it was immediately. And you know, it kind of coincidental, but this picture over here on the wall, it really looks like the site where this old canoe is. You know, it's just all mossy. You've got some second growth trees in there, and you know, old stumps. I see one in the background there. That's probably not a canoe site, but nonetheless, looks a lot like that. So it's kind of the perfect setting here. Anyway, Sealaska is, you know, they've kind of protected the site by not releasing the location, and so I can't release that either, right? It's kind of till death do us part on that. We got to keep it a secret, but we did gain permission from Sealaska to go document the old canoe before it just completely melts back into the earth. It's very rotten at this point, and you know, it won't be very many years, and you won't be able to see it anymore. So we wanted to gather specifically some of the shape information from the canoe, because remember I was talking about the steaming, and I was also talking about how a lot of skills and knowledge was lost a long time ago when the old timers transitioned into other types of boat building, and then when they passed away, all that information wasn't saved. Some was, but not all. And one critical, super important thing in this process is knowing what shape to carve this canoe to before the steaming process. So if you carve it incorrectly or outside of certain parameters, it either won't steam open, or it will crack, or something like that. I mean, it's usually something totally undesirable in your canoe project. So that's bad on kind of a grand scale, because when people are trying to learn how to do this, if they have failures, you know, of that type of catastrophic failure, once they've invested all this time and effort and money and stuff into making a canoe, they're unlikely to do it again. And I'm not saying this, Stephanie, but just anytime you want to pop in here, or Bonnie, just shut me up and we'll hear from you.
Chance.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, we in the quest to make canoes as good as the old timers did, we need to find out what they were up to. Thanks, Bonnie. And so when this canoe was discovered, it sat out there for a long time, and then we started this project once the stars all kind of aligned. And it's not real apparent in this picture, but you can see that if you look kind of closely, that there's something going on here. There's kind of a ridge here, another here. This is actually that old canoe, and this is our partner Jason, who is he's a documentation specialist. I totally met him accidentally during the pandemic. He showed up at the door one day. He and his family, they were coming back from an around the world sailboat trip, and just happened to come to our place, and And so anyway, I said, well, okay, we're not really having a bunch of visitors around here, but I'll show you this canoe project, because I had a canoe out in my work tent that I was working on. And, you know, as they were leaving, his wife, you know, thankfully we have great wives, she says, you know, Jason, you should tell this guy what you do. And he's like, well, you know, never really had a real job, but, you know, I do this, I'm a documentation specialist. I specialize in documenting old wooden boat hulls. And I was like, no kidding. So anyway, you can imagine that we kept in contact and, you know, kind of started doing stuff like this. And we also documented a canoe that's in a museum up in Skagway. If you ever get I mean, make a specific trip, go to Skagway, check out this old canoe that's in a museum up there. It's just a beauty of the type of canoe that I'm interested in. But anyway, you know, as we kind of move forward here and, you know, started getting into the, you know, Jason and Stephanie started getting more into photogrammetry, and we were fortunate enough to receive this grant, which, you know, it's a matching grant. It's not enough money to, you know, do the project, but it was like enough to give us the confidence that we'd figure that out when we needed to, right? So we developed some great partnerships with some other folks. This is Professor Daniel Monteith from the University in Juneau. And so, you know, we've had some really great people from the university that have partnered up with us, as well as some folks from Cultural Heritage Imaging down in San Francisco. They're like the gurus of photogrammetry, I don't know, maybe in the world.
They learned it from the guy who invented it, so yeah. They are incredible.
Yeah. The geeks of photogrammetry. So this is you know, another shot out at the canoe site, and I'll talk about this one for a minute. You know, this just shows myself and Dan and Sanjay Pyare. He's also a professor up there at the university. You can see he's got this controller in his hand. He came down with, like, I don't know, like a $30,000 drone that we had to carry up the mountain and not break. And, you know, he flew it around up in the trees and flew LiDAR all over this site. He did it for a couple of days. He gathered so much information, and it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of it. And so it turns out that this particular place, it's more than a single canoe. Like, that's why we went in there, was after the information from the single canoe, but it's really an entire site where folks a long time ago had made quite a number of canoes. And so there are old cedar stumps around there, you know, big ones like 4 feet. And you can see where, well, there's one of them. This is the stump from the canoe that we're documenting. And presumably Stephanie and Jason they're using photogrammetry on this stump right now so that they can create a 3D image. I'm only saying that because they have these, what do you call these stuff? Some kind
scale
of
bars.
Scale bars in there. And it's quite a process. They take a camera, Steph.
Okay, we take a camera. The idea with photogrammetry is that you take a bunch of images that overlap each other a certain amount, and then there's this fancy program that takes days and days sometimes to patch all of this information together, and then you get a 3D model that is accurate down to like microns. It's incredibly accurate. You can also do this with a phone if you just walk around something, but it's not as accurate, and you can get all sorts of crazy skewed stuff. So the people who are teaching me, they're doing documentation for like the Smithsonian and all the big universities. They help them either do it or learn how to do it so that they can have really detailed, accurate models of the artifacts that they're starting to repatriate and send back to tribes and stuff. So they're really focused on that. So I'm grateful to have been able to learn from them. But we had to really dance around the stuff in the forest. They were like, they were a little bit skeptical whether or not we were going to be able to do it because Jason and I have never done photogrammetry before. So we learned for this project. Jason had a little more experience than I did going in because he practiced at home before he came. But we took, of the canoe, I think it was like almost 400 pictures at varying levels, and we have to carry the light around and the camera and kind of like just sort of dance and take a picture. And then we also did the stump, and we did the kind of the chunk that was cut between the stump and the canoe. We tried to get everything so we could piece it together back when we were at the computer. And luckily Jason did most of the computer, all of the computer processing with the heritage imaging people. And let's see, what else do I want to say about that? The scale bars are in there because they help us get that accuracy. They're tuned down to just like portions of a millimeter, which is crazy to me. But somehow all of our pictures did the magic. We didn't have to go back out there and do it again. And I think we have some pictures of maybe the result of that, or a video or something.
Yeah, so this, so we don't have it on, we don't have it on this slideshow, but if you have the right programming on your computer, when you look at this, these images like that stump, it's in 3D. It's very cool.
We should, at some point, I'm also the website person, which is not my thing. But at some point, we will be able to upload that to share with everybody so that you can like click on it and zoom in and stuff. That'll be a possibility.
Yeah, we do have one video on here, and we'll see it in a moment, but it's not in 3D, but it'll give you kind of a basic idea. Can we go back to that one just for a moment, Nan? Yeah, so this was really interesting to me. I know for some folks this might be, oh, well, it's just a bunch of moss, but we're down at what was most likely the stern of the canoe here, and you can see there's like some big cracks in it. And remembering, no one knows why this project was abandoned, right? Like some people were building this canoe, had obviously made other canoes in this spot, and at some point they stopped with this canoe partially hollowed out, and they went away. And we can speculate about all kinds of reasons. I've definitely done that. And then I just discovered another possibility when we were out here. We were out here for what, 5 days? At the, I think it was 5 days at the site doing all this photogrammetry and measuring and whatnot. Anyway, this lump of moss up here hadn't really caught my attention that much before, but this time, for some reason it did. I think in part because there's a little deer trail here that I'm kind of squatted down by, and it had eroded, just the deer walking by there had kind of exposed part of the canoe down here and kind of done some things to this clump of moss. And I just noticed like there's all this directional cracking in the dirt that's under this moss. And I thought, that was kind of weird, so I started looking at it more and realized that actually that was the remnants of a tree that had fallen across the canoe at some point. I'm just going to guess it was probably a hemlock, because a lot of that, the little trees around there are hemlock. Remembering that hemlock rots pretty quickly, this might have fell a long time ago, and now it's just dirt. And it didn't look recognizable as a log because, the parts over on this side had just broken off and dropped. You might see some remnants way out here or something. But on this side, remembering that it had turned to dirt and the deer are walking through there, there's nothing left of it in a large space where all the deer, bear, or whatever have been walking through there. It's just gone, except for the path there is kind of a brownish color. And so it's another possibility, we identified where the stump was up here from that little tree where it fell. And there is a bunch of cracking right in this place where that is, so that no one knows, but it's another possibility as to why this project was abandoned. The tree could have fallen while they were in the middle of the project. Okay, next one, please. This is just Jason taking some measurements along the length. so he has kind of backup information, I think, along with the photogrammetry work and the scale bars. This canoe, we don't really see it in this picture too much, but when the canoe was fallen, there's evidence suggesting that they probably fell a couple of smaller trees first where this tree was going to fall, you know, both to cushion the fall and to keep the project supported. And that and the combination of a little stream running right underneath the canoe has kept a part of it elevated, which was really valuable because, you know, the photogrammetry folks could get way underneath it and get imaging down there. Next slide, please. And there was a lot of this out there. A lot of it. But, you know, all of these things, it was kind of interesting. So, you know, I grew up around, well, all throughout Southeast Alaska, but the vast majority of it was Prince of Wales. When I was born, my dad was an A-frame logger. Like, he was one of the last A-frame loggers. And so, you know, like my first memories, some of my first memories are just being a little kid sitting on the bench while my mom and dad were doing that work. My mom ran the yarder, my dad worked out in the brush. Anyway, I'm just making a long story out of, you know, having been around logging a lot. And then, you know, when I graduated from high school, you know, I naturally went into it, that line of work. And then at some point what I would consider naturally got out of the work. But anyway, I found that really valuable because, you know, I was able to notice some of those things that I think hadn't been noticed before or may never have been noticed, you know, like just those little logs falling down. Because that's a common practice if you're in timber falling and you're going to lay down a really nice piece of wood, you don't want it to break. You know, it's important to take good care of it. And the folks making the canoes, they wouldn't want any cracking or breaking in their canoes, so they would cushion the fall of their canoe tree. Okay, next one, please. And here, this is interesting. This is a different part of the canoe building site, and it looks like something went wrong here. Maybe they didn't have the right cushion trees down there like I was talking about, or, you know, whatever. But there's a stump up here. This tree was falling off. There's some really clear chop marks, you know, made from some tool, possibly an adze, possibly an axe, I don't know. But, you know, the tool marks look like they're probably about 3.5 to 4 inches wide, real nice clean marks. Anyway, the top half of this log is missing, you know, and this is only guesswork, but what I think probably happened, the way this tree is still laying full length on the ground, is that most likely it laid across the land there in this kind of curved area, and nice cedar being what it is, just split lengthwise. So, you know, this whole piece down here split. You can see I'm kind of imagining it in 3D, but it split, and then there's some chop marks further down here, and this upper section of the log is missing. So we don't know what they did with that. If I was guessing, I would say they probably split planks out of it, you know, for house building or those kinds of things. But it's possible they did something else with it too. You know, we're quite a ways, quarter mile from the water here or thereabouts. So, you know, a lot of
several miles.
felt like several miles to some. Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. Here we are back at the canoe doing photogrammetry and whatnot. You know, there's the canoe. We're looking at the bottom of it here. And there's the stump that it came off of right down here, kind of below Sanjay. It's not real evident, but there's there's kind of a long, what I would call a long butt that was cut off. So, you know, red cedar tends to rot from the inside out. So even if you find a really nice one, a lot of times there'll be rot in the heart down low. You know, it can also run all the way through the tree, but in general, if it's a really nice tree and there's rot, it will just be down in the bottom. So there's like maybe 7-ish, 8-foot chunk, long butt that was cut off and rolled down the hill. I think you mentioned that you did photogrammetry on that one too. So
yeah.
At some point we might be able to in the future, we might see that in 3D. Remembering we're still only halfway through this project. Okay, next slide, please. Here's Sanjay with his ridiculously expensive LiDAR imaging drone. Yeah, this was quite a deal because the canopy there is pretty tight, and he has to program this thing before it ever leaves the ground, and it has to have a clear space to go up through all the trees, and so that's a big responsibility for the operator. I mean, kind of fun for the rest of us sitting back watching it happen, but it's a lot. And I think, in that space where it lifted off there, it was missing branches by just a few inches as it was going up. And then it would go up there. LiDAR, laser imaging. So I don't know if you've ever seen these pictures of like a landscape and it looks kind of gray in different shades. Anyway, LiDAR, I think the possibilities are pretty vast. So it's more than just looking at the land. You can, if you know how to do this stuff, you can find out what kind of vegetation's on the land in theory. You can do a lot of different things. They call it peeling away the layers, which is a little beyond my comprehension. We don't know what Sanjay is going to produce with this LiDAR, but we definitely know that he will produce this very clear landscape underneath, just so he can just show the ground without all the vegetation on it. We can see what the lay of the land is. I think in theory we could peel back a few layers and just look at the stumps that we're interested in, or we could leave trees. It's pretty amazing stuff. And it's expensive to do. I think it used to be just a few years ago they would have to fly an airplane over. Now they have their ridiculously expensive drones that they can fly instead. This is we don't have the software on this computer right here to play this in 3D, but this is just a little video of the canoe, and you guys would just have to imagine it in 3D. We'll just go on to the next one anyway. So what was going to happen was that this canoe was going to revolve around here, and you'd be able to see underneath it and whatever. But for some reason, that isn't even going to work. So no big deal. We'll just go on to it.
We'll plug it into the YouTube video.
There you go.
Maybe that'll work.
You might be able to pull up just the regular file at the end of this too, for anybody who
Yeah.
wants to stick around.
So this, this is real kind of preliminary, but remembering we're only halfway into this project. But what's happened here is they took all the photogrammetry, and then Jason has laid out all the pieces. This isn't where they actually lay on the ground, but he's rolled this back up to where it might have laid when they felled a tree. So you can imagine that this is the tree that it came off this stump. They cut off this long bud a long time ago, started building the canoe here, and this is the top of the tree which still exists. So when we were looking out over the whole site, what we found in many places was we would find a stump, short piece cut off, treetop, nothing here, Okay, next one, please. This is some other cool stuff. So eventually Jason will also create some lines drawings, which for me personally, I'm super interested in because it's a great way to compare shapes of canoes to other canoes, which, that comparison, how that is when you're trying to build something, can just be really helpful. So this is just an example of some of the things he can do. He can take individual slices at any place in the canoe, like this. I think he could do that from any angle. Next slide. Here's one where he's taken a slice from end to end, and I know he had some other ones too where he like made it kind of a cone shape around it, that would have been the shape of the log, and it kind of shows you where the moss is, relative to where the canoe is. Sort of interesting stuff. Anyway, there are a lot of possibilities there. We don't even know all the possibilities yet, Next one, please. These are some more things. And okay, this is from the one down in the shed. So this is a little canoe that we started a number of years ago. Haven't gotten around to finishing yet. Anyway, but it just gives you part of an idea of what that shape is before. You know, Jason has just taken some slices out of this canoe, or Jason and Stephanie, I should say. They did a lot of photogrammetry on canoes that we actively have and that we're working on. Next one, please. And you know, he put this together just kind of for fun, to illustrate a little bit of what happens there, you know, in the steaming process. You see this funny little thing down here, and that's because this is a result of some photogrammetry on actual canoe that has a little footpath down the middle. So that's what that is. Like some of you folks have walked on this thing. Maybe slipped and fell on it, I don't know. Okay, next one, please. And so yeah, this is just more of that. I can see that we're not gonna have enough time to probably talk about every single thing here, which would be fun maybe only for me. But you know, there's so many great reasons for doing this kind of thing. You know, we have, you know, for me it's just healthy. Like I feel kind of compelled to do it. I feel healthy when I'm thinking about it, when I'm trying to do it. I feel good about other people getting involved in it. And next slide, please. This is the lines drawing I was talking about. I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, but anyway, this is the lines drawing that Jason made of the canoe in Skagway. So Bonnie and I and Jason, we went to Skagway. Bonnie and I have been there a couple times. And anyway, in this particular case, we didn't use photogrammetry. We rented a total station, which is like kind of like a piece of surveyor's equipment, but it uses laser measuring, and took hundreds and hundreds of measurements on this canoe inside and out. And then, you know, Jason, this being his line of work, produced this drawing, as well as a whole bunch more. We got a little carried away on this one. We did a lot of stuff. But anyway, this is a nice basic one that shows you basically everything you would need to build the canoe if you didn't have to steam it. You know, so this is the final shape. Okay, next one, please. This is just a little bit of like modern canoe making. So this is in our little carving tent behind our house, 30-foot canoe project. And you know, this shows this nice red cedar log. It's just a beauty. See some of you sawmill guys wanting to saw this up, Dale. Anyway, it's just a beauty. There's no rot in the heart. Nice and solid. Probably 400 years old. And I know at some point hopefully we'll talk some more about forestry and this kind of thing, which is I'm fairly passionate about too. But I'm saying that because this is about 400 years old. And there's no known way to speed up the process of growing a tree of this quality, right? It has to grow for 400 years, which means we need to manage the forest in a way that can happen if we want this type of wood in the future. And to me, that's really important. I'm hoping that, you know, like my granddaughter Thavara's great grandkids have all the red cedar like this that they need for whatever they need it for, and that we don't just ship it off all overseas. Okay, I won't get on a rant, but anyway, this is a little bit of canoe making. You know, you might wonder about some of the tools. We do have the power adze, which is really nice, also known as a chainsaw, that you can, the power adze, you can, you can take the bulk off, but it's really risky to get too carried away with a chainsaw. I know a couple of different people that wanted to make canoes and they use chainsaws, you know, because it's a lot of work and they want to speed up the process. But 2 stories I know of where a chainsaw went through the hole and they didn't even know it until it was too late, right? So big holes in the bottom of your boat are not good. This is a little further in the process. You know, you can see that I've just establish this line. You can also see that the sides here are kind of straight, and then we get into this curve, and you know, hopefully this straight line will kind of come out later in the steaming process. Next slide, please. And you know, this is a little further along. We're getting ready to steam it. We got a fire going down on the beach. The beach is a great place to do it because you have the resources you need. You got water, you got firewood. What else do you need? Fresh rocks. Yeah, there you go. Next one, please. This is during the actual process, and you can see we've just, you know, we're using just hand shovels there. Got a nice steel spade on it that won't burn when we pick up the hot rocks out of the fire, although your skin will. So you got to be pretty careful because hot fire and those rocks do emit a lot of heat. And there's some of those hot rocks right there. You can see we've just pulled them out of the fire and they were glowing when you first pull them out. They start cooling off pretty quick. You can still see a little glow back there. Those things are hot. Next one, please. And here you can see that that we've had the shape change, right? It doesn't have those straight sides anymore. We've got more of a curve here, and but I would like to point out that, you know, part of the reason we're doing this is because while, you know, we can feel real good about this, I feel great about this canoe. It's a great canoe, but it's in my estimation, it's not as good as the old timers. Like, those folks had it down. They knew their stuff. Can we go back to that for just a sec? I'm long-winded, so it takes me a while to get to a point. But if you notice right here, you know, like you can see that you got this nice smooth curve coming down, and then it changes a little bit. It's a little tighter bend and comes down there. And when I study the old pictures, the old timers, somehow they carved it right in the beginning before they're steaming, where they have this curve that, like, you don't notice this kind of bend, this transition right here. It's just real nice and smooth all the way up. So we got a ways to go, you know, to get where they were. Next one, please. And this is just another great thing about it, you know, like canoes bring people together. You know, we have the magic of Facebook, and, you know, we probably live, what, a quarter mile from the water, and you have a little trail and a road that goes up by your house. But when we decided to take this down and steam it on the beach, Bonnie put out a little notice on the Facebook one day and says, hey, we're going to steam the canoe tomorrow. Anybody want to help pack it down? And it was like all kinds of people showed up and helped pack the canoe down and pack it back up through the woods, whatever. This is a great shot. This fellow right here, Dennis Pollock, he is the one that originally found the old canoe out in the woods. You know, I can't say enough good about him, because there are people, I don't know if I want to say plenty, but there are plenty of people, high percentage of people in his position, you know, as working in the logging industry, who would have just ignored it, not known what it was, or intentionally covered it up. So he wasn't like that. Like, he kind of love him for it. It was really cool. And might even have an audience member in here somewhere. Yeah, you do. I don't know who took this picture. I kind of think it was one of the folks on this journey. You know, this is a canoe that we just finished this year and took it to celebration in Juneau. Anyway, no one died, and and I think anybody want to say something about this?
These two amazing people were in our canoe.
They were. Super cool. Yeah. Did you ever get in there? I don't remember.
No, I never got a chance.
Have to do it again.
Yeah.
See? Yeah, we have to do it again.
I didn't get there.
Look at this guy. I didn't get any permission from this, Fred, but you might recognize this guy in the middle.
That's an outrage.
Yeah. So this is a different canoe. This is a smaller one, 18-footer. I don't remember what year this was, but anyway, this was sea trials. The first time we had put this in the water, and we're just messing around out there in front of Kasan. Lots of fun. Next one, please. And this is that same canoe that we just saw a little bit later on. This is Stephanie's brother Eric, and Bonnie and I's son. I don't mean to say it in a way that makes it sound like he's not, but you know, you got to be careful with these things, your politics, whatever. So anyway, that's my son Eric and his friend Frank here. And they went out this morning. We found out about it a little bit later and then chased them down in the skiff. You can't really see it here, but they went out seal hunting. They have a seal That's what this lump here is behind this bag. And it was just super cool. Like there's just so many fun things that can, like healthy things that come out of the seal. So I don't think there's, they went back and processed that hide and rendered out the oil and gave seal meat to anybody that wanted it. And they cooked it and made sausage. They did a lot. I tried it a lot of different ways when they were working on it. Anyway, it's fun. Next. And this is just kind of the future. This is kids working on model canoes, and this is where I think the magic really happens. That's how it happened for the old timers. Like they were learning, as little kids, they were learning from folks who knew a lot more than them, each one of them getting kind of more of a head start on the process than ones before. And that's what these folks are doing. They're just kind of they will be better. If we do anything halfway right, they will be much better at us than doing this when they start doing it. Okay, keep going. Oh yeah, and here's more, there's more than just, making canoes. There's the whole discovery. There's preserving the knowledge and the skills. There's this generational sharing aspect, and using the canoes is critical. Like if you guys make a canoe around here, if the museum makes one, I'll be careful I say with this politics too, but like if the museum makes one, I encourage you to make sure that thing gets in the water. Like you don't have to use it every day, but make sure it gets out there often, because when they just go on the shelf, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't learn from it. Anyway, there's Stephanie. This is Thavara's cousin, Eric's daughter, Uli, and I think she's like, 1 year old or a year and a half or 2. I don't know. She was pretty young there. Anyway, learning all that. This is some other kids. We took one canoe blank over to the Thorne Bay School, and we were teaching kids about what we know about canoes there, sharing the information. And that's kind of why we're here, and what we want to do with you. If you have questions or if you have, your own knowledge, I'm interested in all of it. Let's keep going. And I guess that's about it. We're at the end.
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour, so I know that some people might need to head back to work in drudgery, but we have Stephanie, we have Stormy and Bonnie, and they're going to stay for questions. So if you feel like you're going to miss out on some of that interaction, we'll make certain that it's included in that YouTube video of this event. So if you have to leave, feel free. We're not going to call you out for leaving the room. But if you'd like to stay and you have questions, now is that time.
All right. Thank you, guys. I mean, whether you leave or whether you stay, thank you very much. So glad you're here. It really is all of you that make all of this possible. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
So starting here in the front.
Thanks again, great presentation. And of course, I don't want people to move to Casana, so it's not Casana, of course, but they must be working on canoes. Like, you look the same as you ever, like, it's a fountain of youth, like, canoes. And then I'm glad you pointed out, how people think of a dugout canoe as a log. It still looks like a log. And then, of course, in the ocean, it handles like a log. And it's good to point out, these are the result of an advanced civilization. And so thanks for pointing that out. And I had so many questions, but you answered so many of them. Great presentation. One of the things I'm wondering, besides the steaming, there is that definite shape to a Haida ocean-going canoe. Is there anything you can share? Why is the bow like that? Is there a little bit you could share with that?
Yeah, thank you. Is it possible we could, pull one of those canoe pictures back up? Thank you, Mr. Olson. Yeah, really. So I'm going to disclaim, that I don't really feel like I can know why the old timers did the things they did, because they my speculations may be the same, but they also may be incorrect. What I've noticed when we were out in the water, and I guess we've had the good fortune of being in quite a bit of rough water. Like not too often have we been out when it's been very calm, and you can see, especially like I'm generally in the stern here, and so I can see everything that's happening forward. And when you get into some big waves, and of course some folks up in the bow will definitely see what's happening up there, but it looks like when you're in the big water, essentially what's happening when you're going into a big wave, the top of that wave is more or less just following this curve all the way along. So you can imagine up here in the front, if we just climb up on top of the canoe for a minute, it's really narrow up here, right? And so in order to gain buoyancy, we have to gain it vertically, essentially. And so that high bow helps. If there's a big wave here, this is going to kind of slice into it a long while before it starts lifting. Whereas back here in the midsection, it's so much wider that, it lifts easier just because it's more buoyant there. You're displacing more water. So, and was there another question in there, Fred?
No, but I'd love to ask more questions. But I'm wondering too, if it might help those guys or yourself, if what they're learning from the LiDAR, first of all, there was some LiDAR done broadly on Peninsula some years ago. I wonder if they could compare if that helps. But then also I wonder if they're keyed into that Dr. Bagestiel work with different sea level change, and that's what we had thought about when we went to that site the first time.
Right.
It's so far from the shoreline now, but it actually wasn't before. And then one last question, sorry. But like that was excited me so much about that site was that clearly there were ones that were made and weren't there. It was really exciting and emotional to talk about. But I know it's logged, but I wonder, of course, don't go there as looking for this, but are there, when you've been back, are there some trees that could maybe be a canoe, or is it really logged and there are no more canoe logs?
There are a couple nearby that I kind of eyeballed a little bit. Yeah, so there are some others. Not like, they're kind of bordering the site, but that particular area, the way I'm not going to give away a bunch of clues for all you treasure hunters out there, but the way. Right by that. Yeah. The way the hillside is there, I've been sworn to secrecy. Sea Alaska made me do this, but the way the hillside is, it kind of goes up and then there's a bench. Like for anybody that's spent a lot of time in the woods, you come across these sometimes. And most of this activity seems to have happened on that bench. That's where the big cedar trees were. They were of a high quality, and essentially the canoe makers of the earlier time, they made a canoe out of every piece of wood that would work on that bench. We don't really know or have any speculation over like the time span from the first canoe made there to the last one or anything like that. We might speculate later, but I kind of think that's risky, so probably won't.
Or does the LiDAR have clues on age like that? Maybe?
I don't know. The LiDAR is a whole, that I think that's an expanding universe essentially. Like they don't even know what they don't know in the world of software and LiDAR. Like there's just a lot going on there.
Oh, and one last question. Can you share this with the former tribal presidents of OVK? The presentation?
I probably could, yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, someone could, Bonnie could, yeah. Yeah, we can definitely.
I'm glad you thank you again to Sea Alaska for
Yeah.
not lying. And Dennis Farrell.
Yeah, okay.
Well, people are remaining in the room, I think, because you have questions, so I think we can maybe do two more, maybe, or three questions here. So if someone has a question, feel free to raise a hand and shout it out there. All right.
I just had a quick one. I noticed in one of the early canoe photos, the more older ones, there was a flag in the canoe that almost looked like it had stripes on it. Did you notice that? And
Oh, the black and
your flag too.
In the black and white photos.
Yeah.
Well, there were some American flags in there. Is that, it was probably an American flag. I don't know what that, yeah, I don't know what those events, like this one, it looks like an American flag. Probably not so many stars as we have now on there, but yeah.
Just thought it was interesting. And was that traditional? Did they, different groups fly their flags?
You know, I do not know. I have no idea why all that was happening. I don't know.
Maybe so they can be differentiated between Canadians, Russians, and Americans.
I don't know. Yeah.
Hard to say. It seems like there's a lot of stuff going on, like around the time that, you know, we had kind of our big transition where it was better for the natives to pretend not to be so native. So I'm not saying that this is why, but like maybe they saw all of the outsiders boats with the flags on the back and they're like, we're gonna make sure that they know that we're the good ones, you know?
Could have been a regulation too, like if you're flying in U.S. waters, you have to fly a U.S. flag or something.
Or maybe
Yeah.
even transferred from Russia.
We did have one question too. I know you briefly touched on it, but can you talk about some of those partnerships that are taking place to identify trees in these old growth forests that might be used a little, you know, in for future cultural uses?
Sure. So remembering that red cedar is the best wood for the dugout canoe making, and that, you know, canoes are important across the region, but that the upper limit of red cedar growth is kind of in the neighborhood of the north end of Prince of Wales Island, you know, Cape, Petersburg, Wrangell. You know, like by the time you get in those areas, not much red cedar and certainly not much of any quality that you're going to make canoes out of. So when you think about that and kind of combine that thought with the fact that tons and tons and tons of red cedar have been exported overseas out of this area, we find ourselves in a situation where it's really difficult to get a high quality red cedar log for anything, you know, and especially canoe making. You know, if you want to make a big one, it takes a big piece of wood, and you want nice quality all the way to the middle. So, you know, I think a number of us, and I'll just volunteer Fred into this too. You know, Fred's a former president of the Organized Village of Kasan, and you know, has a long genetic history there. Us and many others have been interested in perpetuating quality red cedar growth in the area for eternity. And so, you know, we spent a lot of time talking with the Forest Service, and we continue to do that. And at some point, you know, all the pieces were in the right place, and, you know, the tribal government and the Forest Service came together and had a workshop. And since then, there's been a couple more involving Sealaska and other tribal entities. And the idea is really to figure out how to inventory what exists right now, so we know what exists in the forest, and develop a management plan so that it will always be available. And that will include managing, you know, up and coming forest growth so that it grows into this type of wood. So different growth conditions, you know, they create a different type of wood essentially. So remembering, like for the folks that were around here in the pulp era or remember any of that, there was a thinning practice that came about. It's all about creating more fiber more quickly. So it's all about the volume of wood that you could put into the pulp mill and digest and make products out of that way. But for this type of wood, you need to really slow it down. You need to slow down the growth. And you know, I think there's a few of us that have some speculation on how to do that, but also you have to do it over the course of 400 years, right? So it's a work in progress. But
Do we have any other questions from the group? The last thing we'd love to have on camera is you presented a little bit about this project in process. Where can we learn more about this as the project continues, and how can we support the work you're doing?
Well, you can come visit. Or, you know, I mean, the easy way, if you're not able to come visit in Kasan, you know, you can check out our website. Stephanie is the website manager, and, you know, that's kind of a quick and easy way. You can call us up, email, whatever, looking for more information. You can also, you know, if you're the super interested type that wants to talk in person that can't make it over, you know, we all do come through Ketchikan occasionally. If you don't live in Ketchikan somewhere else, it's possible that we may come through there too, or, you know, someone that we're working with might. Today, this very day, there's also a presentation happening in the Dolphin Club in San Francisco. Our partner Jason is presenting there. So, you know, this afternoon, if you're down there, you know, stop by the Dolphin Club. I don't even know what the Dolphin Club is, but it sounds really cool to say it.
Well, thank you for indulging me in asking, getting some questions on tape. Again, for all those that are in the audience, we'll make certain that an edited version of this presentation will be on our YouTube channel. But I'm leaving Stormy and Bonnie and Stephanie at the front as captive audiences, so if you've got questions for them, head at it, and also you're welcome to, of course, explore the museum today. So thank you all.
Thank you, Erica.
You know,